Good morning, good afternoon, good evening if it's evening for you already. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for taking the time to be here for this webinar. We're going to look at how we can improve our hiring processes so we can make sure that we're attracting the best possible talent. Feel free to say hello in the chat box and ask your questions in the Q&A box throughout today's session. My name is Saranya. My pronouns are she, her. It's probably the first time that most of you are meeting me, unless you've done some sessions with CCDIC or with Diversio before. My colleague Sheena is here to help moderate some of the questions or comments that might come through the chat box and Q&A as well. I've set aside some minutes at the end to take some of those questions as well. Given that you've chosen to attend this session, I assume that you're either directly or indirectly involved in the hiring process. And of course, our goal is to make sure that we're selecting the best candidates possible. At the same time, you might also be interested in inclusive hiring practices. There's a common assumption that these two goals are at odds. But in this webinar, I'm going to show you how these goals are not contradictory and that to be inclusive is to select the best candidates. So I hope that you leave this session with some strategies to implement in your own companies to improve your hiring processes. So I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I'm joining you from Toronto today. I see that there's a lot of people from different parts of Canada while I'm scrolling through. I mostly see, I see someone from Kansas City as well joining us. Yeah, it's nice to have you here. I want to acknowledge that I am on the traditional territories of many different nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is now home to many different First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and of course, not just Toronto, all over Canada and North America as well. I want to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Please feel free to share a land acknowledgement if you want to in the chat box. You're welcome to do so. As a newcomer, it's really important for me to learn more about the peoples, Indigenous peoples, of course, and the lands that they've lived on for thousands of years. Land acknowledgement is one small step towards this effort, but I do other things to learn more, whether that's reading books, films, attending events, whenever possible. So I would also encourage you to engage both with our past as well as our present. Let me introduce myself quickly here. My name is Saranya Manoharan. My pronouns are she, her. I am a consultant here at Diversio. And I come into this work with a master's degree in the psychology of diversity and inclusion from Ireland, Portugal, and Norway. It was a joint master's degree. I also spent a couple of years in India facilitating sessions on these topics, on these very topics. For a few years. India is also where I'm originally from. I investigated the impact of intersectionality on hiring bias, specifically as a research assistant in Switzerland for a few years. So putting all this together, you can say I am a DEI training facilitator, consultant, with a background also in data analysis and behavioral science. As I just mentioned, I have some international experience having lived and worked in a few different countries, and that has been really helpful in improving my cultural competence, cultural awareness, and it makes it easier to work with people from different backgrounds. On the side of hobbies, I am quite passionate about cooking, board games, and comedy shows. And it's helpful that I'm in Toronto, given that there's always something or the other happening in terms of events and whether it's concerts or comedy shows, etc. It's lovely to be here to do this session. Let me introduce Diversio to you quickly. Diversio enables HR and DEI teams to retain talent and boost performance by creating a more inclusive company culture. So we have a platform that measures, tracks, and improves employee experience across our 6-part inclusion framework. we deliver insights, empowering HR and DEA teams to make people decisions based on data instead of opinions. We also offer training services through our EDU wing, and we also offer consulting services. So please feel free to learn more about what we're doing by going to our website. So let's look at the agenda for today. We're going to begin by talking about the standard hiring practices, right? The things that we see most commonly being used today, and see what the shortcomings are from research. Data from many decades of research shows that there's a lot of bias in the standard hiring process, which means that, number one, we're needlessly limiting the talent pool by excluding a lot of different folks. And two, we're not actually selecting the best candidates through our traditional process. So today we're going to look at more data-driven hiring methods, which can be more effective at identifying this talent that we seek. And finally, we'll conclude today's session with the business benefits of inclusive hiring, right? Because inclusive hiring does take some time and effort. So we'll see what the benefits of that can be. And of course, like I mentioned, there's a quick Q&A at the end. And I'll answer some questions live, whatever questions might be left towards the end. So let's begin with an icebreaker, right? We're going to be using this anonymous polling website to interact with one another throughout today's session. I'd like you to scan the QR code that you see up here, or you can type in the link pollev.com/ideasm. You can do it on your phone, tablet, computer, it does not matter. I also see that my colleagues have put in the link in the chat box as well, so please feel free to click that as well, whichever you feel comfortable doing so. So I have my question for you here. You can still see the QR code displayed on the right if you haven't had a chance to scan it yet. You can also see the website on the left here and on the top, pollev.com/ideasm. So the question I have here for you is, when you're hiring candidates throughout the process, right, what are the different tools that you're using? And you can, it can be anything, right? So I see here it's a word cloud. So we see interviews obviously showing up in a really big font, letting us know that the majority of people are choosing interviews. Some people are saying testing. Testing seems to be the next popular thing. Testing. If you want to type more than one word, please put I should have mentioned this, sorry. Please put a hyphen in between or underscore or something, so it'll show up as one. References is something that's coming up, psychometric assessments, informal chats, portfolio, behavioral questions. This is moving really fast, but I think social media, maybe some people have mentioned social media as well. Soft skills, so we're testing for soft skills as well. Assignment, presentations is something that's come up a couple times. Let me see. Video, okay, so some of us may also be doing video interviews, possibly. So there's a lot of different methods that we're using, but overall, it does seem like interviews kind of seem to be extremely popular over almost everything else. And we are going to talk about interviews in today's session. Thank you so much for sharing this. Referrals, there's also referrals, and I guess recruiters as well. So some of us may also be using recruitment agencies to help us find candidates. So there's a lot of different methods we're using. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, there is quite a bit of data showing that there is hiring bias, specifically that different candidates are judged differently in the process. That is why when I say hiring bias, what I mean is that candidates, we're not applying the exact same evaluation standards to everybody that comes to us. That our perceptions are being skewed based on societal stereotypes around us. So you might have already heard of some of this research. Some of this might be new. But as we go through this section, I'd like you to keep in mind that to be human is to be biased. So this is not about blaming folks. And there's nothing, if we are biased, it doesn't mean we're an exception. Unfortunately, we're the norm when we're being biased. The focus of today's session is to understand where bias is so that we can devise systems that can minimize bias and maximize accuracy. Again, remember, our goal is to evaluate candidates accurately and fairly so that we can pick the best ones. So while we go through this data, that's what I would like your focus to be on. Where can we improve? What are we doing right now, and where can we improve our processes? All right, so let's begin with ATS. I'm not 100% sure if I saw that up on the previous workload. I might have missed it. So ATS, of course, stands for Applicant Tracking System. It's a software that helps recruiters manage the hundreds of applications and the hundreds of resumes that they receive for job postings. They're primarily used to filter the applicants efficiently so that we can easily find the most promising ones. As you can imagine, a lot of employers use ATS systems. In fact, more than 90% of employers use them to screen resumes. But at the same time, 88% of employers say that highly skilled candidates are being vetted out of the process because they don't meet the exact criteria in the job description. So when we're using ATS, we're filtering resumes through highly specific search terms. For example, a particular college degree or a very precisely described skill. So someone with a highly related, but say slightly different college degree, or someone describing their skills using a different term in their resumes might be getting filtered out. I definitely understand that it can be tedious to manually review hundreds of resumes, right? Which is what recruiters used to do before we had ATS. And of course, as humans, we do rely on shortcuts when pressed for time. So ATS was supposed to solve these challenges, and I definitely understand the appeal, but I want us to be aware of the disadvantages of this process. So people with atypical career progressions, people with slightly different profiles compared to the standard profile might not be getting through this stage, this initial stage, even though they might in fact be the better candidate in terms of skills, performance, work ethic, etc. So the question of whether is ATS actually selecting the most promising candidates from the pool, that is quite debatable. And I would like us to keep that in mind. So of course, companies are becoming aware of the shortcomings of ATS, right? So they've started to integrate AI, or specifically machine learning, artificial intelligence, and specifically machine learning into ATS software to make this process smarter. But it's really important here to remember that the quality of the output depends very much on the quality of the input. If we start off with biased data, no matter how great our machine learning model is, we will inevitably get biased results. Since machine learning models are considered proprietary, there is a lot of secrecy around them. So it's hard to find statistics around these, but we definitely do have some data. We have an anecdotal case where when Amazon trained a machine learning model on 10 years of its own employee data, it found that because the data was heavily skewed towards women, there were more resumes from male candidates in the data that was used to train the model. The model learned to assign higher weights to masculine attributes, and it learned to assign lower weights to feminine attributes in a resume. So what do I mean when I say feminine attributes? That can be somebody studying at a women's college, somebody participating in a women's sports team, or something like that. Would be evaluated less than somebody going to, for example, a men's college. So because the data had an underrepresentation of women, the model learned that, women should be undervalued in the output as well. So it's really important to be wary of claims that ATS or AI models are bias-free. Yes, technically the models themselves don't carry any bias, but the data that we give the model is quite often tends to be biased. So it's important to take counteractive measures proactively. So I have a quick question for you here. I assume many of you use ATS in your own recruitment. So I have a question for you, which is: have you seen evidence that your ATS or AI program does not lead to systemic bias? So have you seen evidence proactively from these companies that show that, yeah, our models have been tested for bias and our models don't have this bias? So yeah, the response options are yes, maybe, no, but I have searched for evidence, no, but I've not searched for evidence. Like I said earlier, there is a lot of secrecy, right, around these models. So companies don't willingly share the data that they train their models on either. So it can be quite tough to gather this evidence. But we might have sometimes we might have not even thought to ask for evidence, right? So that's why I kind of wanted to ask this question to kind of see where we stand. I do see that 10% of you have seen evidence that the programs that you yourselves use does not lead to systemic bias. So that is great. I'm glad to hear that there is some work being done on this and that you're able to get this data. Thanks so much for sharing this. Of course, ATS is but only the very first step in the process. And we eventually get to interviews, right? Like we're usually filtering resumes through the ATS software so we can call people for interviews. That's the next stage. And here I'd like to go through some data on who is more or less likely to receive callbacks for interviews. So let me quickly explain how these studies work. These are called audit studies. Researchers send out identical resumes of candidates, of hypothetical candidates for real job ads, except they change the name of the hypothetical candidate, to be male or female, to be an ethnic majority or ethnic minority, etc. And they calculate how many get a call back, right? So this way they can see if some groups are being discriminated against because the content of the resume is the exact same. The only thing that was changed was the name, and the identity of the person changed in terms of gender or the racial or ethnic background, etc. So here we have the results of a meta-analysis. So a meta-analysis is a study that summarizes many different studies. Specifically, we're looking at, let's say, like an average of 169 studies, mainly from Europe and North America, all the way from 2005 to 2020. So this data is very, very robust because it's not one study, it's a combination of 170 studies. So what do we see? We see that for the exact same resume, racial and minority candidates are 29% less likely to be called back for an interview. Older candidates are 31% less likely to be called back. And candidates with a disability are 41% less likely to be called back. So to be sure, getting interview callbacks is difficult, it's challenging for everybody. We don't get called for every job we apply. But it seems like for minorities, whether that's racially or ethnically, age-wise, or people with disabilities, they need to send significantly more applications before they get a chance to interview. So this is obviously challenging. This is tricky because this means that we're not evaluating candidates fairly, right? So the next stage obviously is the interview process. And I have a question for you here before we talk about what actually happens during the interview process, right? So most of you, not most of you, a lot of you mentioned that you use interviews in the recruitment process. So what kinds of interviews do you conduct? That is something I'd like to know. Do you conduct structured interviews? Do you conduct semi-structured interviews, unstructured, or do you not conduct interviews at all? Because I'm curious to know if there's anybody here that does not conduct any interviews in their hiring process. All right. So a majority of us, about 75% of us, do use structured interviews, and about 25% of us use semi-structured interviews. Nobody uses unstructured interviews, but there's also nobody that uses no interviews. So interviews really do seem to be the absolute standard, right? The most common way of recruiting folks. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm glad to see that a majority of us do use structured interviews, because data shows that unstructured interviews are really bad at predicting job performance. I get the appeal of the interviews because we want to get a sense of the candidate, right? But unfortunately, interviews are not super good as an indicator of job performance. Because interviewing itself is a very particular skill that may not be related to job performance for many jobs. It might be related for some jobs, but for a majority of jobs, interviewing skills are not necessarily related to job skills. Add to this the fact that this is a very high stakes environment. The interviewees are well aware that their job is on the line. So they know that they need to make a positive impression. So what happens is there can be a lot of faking. Now, what do I mean by faking? Faking can be as small as omitting some inconvenient truths or slightly embellishing achievements to project somebody a little more positively, but it can also be as big as outright lying. In fact, over 98% of undergraduates faked answers in a landmark study that actually interviewed them for real jobs. And if we examine who is more likely to fake answers in interviews, it tends to be people who are less honest, less conscientious, and more narcissistic. So unfortunately, people who give fake answers appear like more promising candidates. So they are, in fact, more likely to get follow-up interviews and more likely to get job offers. So there seems to be a lot of incentive to embellish truth in interviews to project ourselves in the best possible light, either by, again, exaggerating our particular contributions or maybe leaving out some difficult things, right? So this can be one reason why interviews aren't very good at predicting skills and qualifications. But let's set aside lying for a bit, right? Maybe it's a bit more extreme. Interviews still require people to communicate and convince someone else about how much we know something, right? And usually interviewers are looking for confidence in responses, like how confident is this person during the whole interview process when they're answering questions. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment right now to think of a person that you know in your life, right? Like anybody in your life who's really good at something but lacks confidence. I'd like you to take a moment to think of somebody. If you have somebody in mind, now I'd like you to think of a person that has a lot of confidence, but who's not very skilled. They think they're doing something super well, but they're not, okay? I'd like you to think of a person like that. Now, if you have these two people in mind, let's say you interviewed these two people. Which one are you more likely to hire? And which of these two people might you actually enjoy working with as a colleague or as a direct report? Which would make a better colleague, but which one might you be more likely to hire? I'd like us to reflect on this a little bit because, yeah, interviews are very common. And confidence can play a really big part in that. So I would like us to kind of rethink what confidence means during an interview. Does it mean that the candidate is more competent, or does it just mean that they are confident? Finally, I would also like to highlight the challenges that interviews pose for non-neurotypical folks, right? So neurodivergent people may struggle with interviews in different ways. Maybe they have trouble not all of them, but some of them may have trouble making eye contact or shaking hands. And research also shows that they're more worried about being too honest in interviews, that they think that they might come across as too honest, and that might lead to negative outcomes in interviews. So interviews can be exclusive in that way, in that there might be some people that are disadvantaged by interviews. So we'll talk more about how we can better the interview process and what are some things we can use in addition to interviews. We'll look at this towards the second half of today's webinar. Give me 1 second. So I'd like to talk now about personality assessments, because that is also something that came up on the word cloud. So the question I have here is, do you hire for personality? So do you do personality assessments as part of the recruitment process? Do you do it all the time? Do you do it some of the time, depending on the position maybe? Or do you never do it? So I say that, so I see that there's about 60% of people that have chosen, it depends on the position. We do it sometimes, we don't do it all the time. And about a quarter of us say we never do it. And about 15% of us say, yes, we do it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's pretty interesting. So let's take a look at what the data shows, right? When it comes to personality assessments and how well they correlate to job performance. Because again, our goal is how well is this person going to be on the job, and how can we measure that, right? And we're using personality assessment for that. So there's two main traits, personality traits that are relevant to the workplace: extroversion and conscientiousness. So let's look at extroversion first. Western society tends to idealize extroverts. In fact, research actually shows that extroverts are perceived to be more intelligent than introverts, even though from IQ tests, we actually know that there's no difference in intelligence between introverts and extroverts. You're not more likely to be intelligent because you're an extrovert, but that is the perception that we have in our society and especially in our workplaces. So sometimes companies and recruiters might prefer to hire extroverts because they might be perceived to be better employees or more social employees, etc., etc. But the evidence is actually quite mixed. Some studies show that extroverts do better in some jobs, specifically people-facing jobs, but other studies show that extroverts do worse than introverts. So we don't have very clear indication of whether some personalities will do better in some jobs. Let's take a specific example, something like sales, right? Sales is an area that would specifically be seen as extroverts territory, but a study showed that in fact ambiverts, people who are in between the introversion extroversion scale, actually have the highest sales productivity. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to box certain personalities into certain roles, because it doesn't seem to be quite so simple and quite so straightforward. So if you are looking for specific personality traits for specific roles, I'd encourage you not to do that if possible, because yeah, and especially to maybe not exclude introverts, because you might think that they might not do well in customer service or sales jobs, because those beliefs seem to be unfounded. The other trait that is relevant for hiring is conscientiousness. We ideally want to select conscientious workers because they're more likely to be to produce better workput. It's a good trait to have in the workplace, and there is good evidence behind this. But I do want to leave a word of caution here that, again, interviewees or candidates, candidates more like, know that they are being given these personality assessments during the hiring process. So they know, again, what's on the line. And there is a possibility, again, of embellishing truth, right? There is no objective instrument that we can use to measure personality traits. So we have to trust that the candidates are answering these honestly. but we can never fully be sure. And they may be aware that conscientiousness and extroversion are valued in workplaces. So they might be tempted to answer more positively on these two traits, even though they might not really, even though that might not really be true. If at all you do have to do personality tests, I would suggest to maybe look mainly on the conscientiousness score, because that seems to be the most relevant to the workplace and to someone's job performance. Let's talk about the role of social media, right? Because I'm pretty sure I saw social media also mentioned in the word clouds. We'll talk specifically about the role of profile pictures and someone's appearance, right? A recent study found that Black women with natural hairstyles were perceived to be less professional, less competent, and were less likely to be recommended for a job interview compared to Black women with straightened hairstyles or white women with straight or curly hair. Obviously, we all know that hairstyles have nothing to do with how competent we are, but it unfortunately seems like our decision-making is influenced by irrelevant details like our hairstyle, like appearance, etc. And of course, when we're going through resumes, we don't have pictures, at least not in North America. And that's helpful to not have pictures. European countries do tend to recommend photos in resumes, especially, for example, in countries like France, Germany, and Switzerland. It's quite common to add a photo in your resume. This is not recommended practice because it seems we do judge a book by its cover. And so appearance might leave people with unfair advantages or disadvantages, depending on where we fall. So let's take a look at that. Better looking people, on average, are more likely to be hired, more likely to be promoted. They earn higher wages, and they receive more positive performance evaluations. And this has been shown across many studies, across many decades. So this is also a robust finding. So even though it's unfortunate, this is the reality that we live in. In general, good-looking people are assumed to have a lot of positive traits, including they're perceived to be more kind, more approachable, smarter, etc. So that is a bias that many of us do carry. And so that also translates into the workplace. In case you think that this is something that maybe applies more to customer-facing roles where, someone's appearance, if you think maybe that matters a bit more in people-facing roles, I'd like you to think again, because the same kind of results were also observed for people with economics PhDs. So you would assume that if somebody has a PhD in economics, that their looks would not matter, that the only thing under consideration in their workplace would be their brains and their work output. But unfortunately, that does not seem to be the case. So it doesn't matter which field you're in, what kind of education you have. It seems like even in any situation, any field, your appearance, the more better looking you are, it does give you some advantage, but of course that means that on the other end, some of us who just don't look so great, we might be disadvantaged. So we've looked at a lot of data, right, that were quite biased towards a lot of different groups of people, whether that's racialized folks or women or people with disabilities or older individuals or introverts or people who are less attractive. I don't want us to be disheartened. Like I mentioned earlier, to be human is to be biased, but we can definitely take steps to minimize bias in our hiring processes. So that is exactly what we're going to turn to next. So what are some systems that we can put in place to minimize these biases? So let's go over some of the best practices in hiring, right? So because we started with ATS, let's also start with ATS here. So it can be a good idea to be more thoughtful when using ATS, right? The applicant tracking systems. When you're running searches, make sure to review the search terms carefully. If there are multiple variations of the terms that are commonly used, maybe try different variations when you're filtering. Let's say you're hiring for a DEI specialist, a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. Maybe also search for EDI or IDEA or DNI, which are also pretty commonly used. I really think we should pick a term at this point. But right now we know that we use many terms. So it can be a good idea to use different terms. If you're hiring for some roles pretty frequently, maybe look for patterns in who's getting to the top of the list consistently and who's getting filtered out pretty consistently, right? For example, if you notice that immigrants are getting filtered out very consistently, possibly because they don't understand the ATS system that we use here in Canada and the US, and maybe they aren't customizing their resumes. What you can do is you can add some information, right, on the job ad about the fact that you use ATS, and that means that they should tailor their resumes. You can add a how-to link. You can add a resource to help them learn about that process. And that can give you a bigger candidate pool to work with. Moving on to AI, and remember we talked about the biased data leading to biased results. We can try asking more questions to the software providers, right? We can ask them, because we're their clients, we're their customers, we buy their software. Are they reviewing their models for bias? Can they share any data with us on this? Any internal research that they've done? For example, what is the proportion of male and female candidates that the model selects to move forward? Is there bias where one gender is prioritized over another? If they had noticed bias, did they implement counter-bias measures? So this is data that they may or may not end up sharing with you, but I think it's still important to communicate to these companies that this is something you care about and this is information that you are seeking from them. And we also talked, moving on from AI, to talk about the societal stereotypes, right? That led us to judge some candidates more harshly, even though they had the same qualifications. One thing that's usually recommended is anonymizing resumes, right? This is something we've heard about quite often. And it's an idea that worked pretty well in the classical music industry. Orchestras before the 1970s were mostly made up of men for a variety of reasons. But it was also commonly assumed that women just weren't gifted musicians, that they just didn't have the talent, right? But then around 1970, blind auditions were introduced, where candidates would perform behind a curtain and the jury would be obviously on the other side of the curtain, and they would make the decision on who to select based solely on what they heard, and they never got to look at the person or know their name. And sometimes they would not meet them until the final decision was made, right? The proportion of women in orchestras went from 6% in 1970 all the way to 33% or even 50% in some orchestras right now. So you can see that blind auditions did have a really significant impact in this industry. And it's easier to do it in that industry. I do want to say that it's more challenging to implement it in the jobs that you're probably hiring for, because even if we remove a name, the resume will still have the university name, the location of the university, somebody's the affiliations, right? The sports team that they performed in, or the extracurricular activities that they participated, someone's year of graduation. These can all identify someone's age, someone's gender, someone's country of origin, etc. And so it can be difficult to maintain anonymity during the hiring process, complete anonymity during the hiring process, but the longer you can maintain, it can still be beneficial. But I just want to highlight that it comes with its own challenges, that it's not fully straightforward. I also want to add a quick note here about language competencies, right? Recruiters quite often in research, they talk about how sometimes they're reluctant to hire immigrants or people with non-Anglo-Saxon names when they're in a hurry to make a decision, because they're worried that the candidate might not speak English well enough. I'm speaking about English-speaking Canada here, but the results also apply for example, a French-speaking Canada, where some people with some names are assumed not to speak French well enough. But it's really important not to assume language competencies based on someone's name or the country of origin or the university that they studied at. Of course, language proficiency is really important, but it's something that we can figure out through a phone screening call. So instead of assuming, we can literally make that 10-minute call, and then we can decide whether to move forward or not. So that brings me to assessments. I cannot overstate the importance of testing during interviews, and I was glad to see a lot of you choosing testing in the word cloud or assessments, right? If you can break down the role into specific tasks and assign them to candidates, that would be the best indicator of that person's job performance, because they're literally doing the job. But there are a couple of caveats to keep in mind here. Make sure that the projects that you're giving them, the tasks that you're giving them, are as close to the job responsibilities as possible. Don't make them too hard. Don't make them too easy. And recreate the working conditions as closely. So, for example, if they will have internet access when doing the task, and if they will have 2 days to do the task, then maybe give them the time and the resources that they will have on the job. And ideally, make sure not to give them tests or projects that will take too many hours, because of course they probably have full-time jobs while they're searching for jobs. If you do require them to spend more time on your recruitment process, maybe think about compensating candidates for the time and effort that they're putting in. So if you need someone, if you're hiring a data analyst, give them actual data to analyze and see and evaluate those answers, right? If you're hiring for a facilitator, ask them to create a presentation, make them present it during the job interview, which I think was also mentioned quite often. I think a lot of job interviews do require people to make presentations, which makes sense. But I would just say to not ask people to make presentations if that's not part of the job description, right? Make sure you're only testing for relevant skills. Use interviews as sparingly as possible. And when you have them, make sure to follow a standardized format with the same or at least very similar set of questions for all interviewees. Also have multiple interviewers, independently rate candidates for their answers, either during the interview or right after the interview, because our memory can't be trusted super well. And the more time that passes between the interview and our actually rating the interviewee, the more biased our responses can become. So it either has to be during the interview or right after. All of these processes can help minimize bias and ensure that we are evaluating candidates accurately and we're judging them fairly, right? So you're more likely to pick the best candidate instead of the one that we most like. I do want to add a word of caution here. As much as standardizing is helpful, it can sometimes go too far. We want to remember that people have cultural and personality differences. Some people may be more likely to emphasize their team achievements compared to their individual achievements, because that's the cultural norm. But it doesn't mean that they cannot work independently or that they're not as accomplished. So if we were an interviewer in this process, we might need to probe about their individual contributions to the team in order to learn more. Some people might be wary of taking up your time and space, so they might give pretty brief answers. But again, it doesn't mean that they can't answer the question in more detail, but they might not know that they can do it. So if you want more detail, just ask them for more detail. If they're able to answer, they will be able to. If they're not able to, then you'll have your answer. Just make sure that when you're probing, don't ask leading questions and try to be as neutral as you can. So let's go over a few more best practices in hiring. And again, as I see my colleagues asking you to enter your questions into the Q&A box. So as we're going through these best practices, you might have some thoughts, you might have some comments or questions. So feel free to put them in the chat box, and I will get to them in a few minutes when I wrap up the presentation. So it's important to have a good job description to begin with, right? I've seen many job ads where they clearly differentiate between essential skills and nice to have skills, or skills that are more of an asset but not needed. That's a really good practice, right? And it's good to review our job descriptions from time to time and not to use, say, outdated job descriptions. So once we have a clear idea of what we are looking for in that particular role, we can design the process to test these skills in multiple modes as well. Let's say we're hiring a customer service person, and their job requires them to interact with customers both orally and in writing. Then we want to make sure that they're testing them on both these skills, right? We're getting them to write and we're getting them to speak. Because if we prioritize just one over the other, we might be advantaging some candidates over other candidates, but the job actually requires them to be able to do both. So the best would be to test both and to kind of go with an average score, right? And weight these skills according to the role. So a good job description is really, it's kind of imperative in this whole process that sets the stage for how accurately we're able to evaluate candidates. So fit is something that comes up quite often, of course, in the recruitment process, and it can be a tricky one. We definitely want the new employee to fit into the role and the team, but quite often it's been used to exclude people that don't look like the people or don't speak like the people that are already in the team. So someone that's different in some dimension may be perceived to not be a good fit. So it's really important to have a discussion internally around what exactly you mean by fit and what specific traits you're looking for. So how would you evaluate whether someone was a good fit or not? Ideally, you do this before you meet the candidates, right? This is not something we do after. This is something we know we want before we go into the process, and we apply these standards evenly to all candidates. Something to also think about, I think I also saw this as a comment earlier about culture ad. If I remember correctly, I think I saw somebody talking about culture ad. So once you've established that the candidate has the skills and qualifications that are required for the role, then you can start to think about what is this person adding to the team, right? What are the complementary skills and perspectives that this person is bringing to the team to make us richer? So instead of just thinking about culture fit, we can go beyond culture fit to also think about culture add. How will this person make our team stronger by giving us extra skills or by giving us extra perspectives that we didn't have before? So finally, I'd like to talk about ensuring diversity in the candidate pool, right? So diversity quotas is a topic that is very hotly contested. People have strong opinions around this. And this is how I like to approach it. Ideally, we don't want to reserve particular positions for equity deserving groups, because it's hard for us to know what that particular candidate pool will look like, right? Until it actually comes in, it's hard for us to know that. So maybe it's not a good idea to go in deciding who you want to hire. But what we can do is ensure that we ask recruitment agencies to bring us candidate pools with a good amount of diversity in it already. That is something that we can push for with recruitment agencies or recruiters if we don't use agencies. So once we have a diverse slate of candidates, then it makes the process easier. We can evaluate candidates as we typically do without any regard for diversity until the very final stage. Let's say we have the top 2 or 3 candidates that we know are well qualified. They would all make excellent employees. At that point, we can say, hey, so we know this person is qualified, but let's now take a look at what is the benefit that they're bringing through their diverse perspective, diverse background. What are the extra things that they might be bringing that we lack in our team right now? So if we do this, it's more likely that the candidate that got hired will also not feel tokenized, and the other people who are in the majority would also perceive this process more fairly and more positively, because we're letting the diversity come into the conversation towards the end stage when we already know that the person is well suited for that role. Finally, I want to talk about improving our processes, right? Kind of tracking and improving our processes. it can be really helpful to gather feedback from both successful and unsuccessful candidates. Successful candidates can tell us how well the recruitment process matches the real job responsibilities, right? Once they're in the job for a couple of months, we can get that feedback from them and see if there's anything to improve. Unsuccessful candidates can also give us information about any barriers in our process. If they felt that they were not able to represent themselves in the best light because of how we designed the process, that can be valuable information to make the process more inclusive. So that is something I would encourage you to do as well. It can also be a good idea to monitor employee trajectories after hiring. Are there some groups that are leaving soon after being hired? Whether that's voluntarily or involuntarily, the more data we have, the better decisions we can make. So it can be a good idea to invest in gathering this data. So I have a question for you here, which is, we went through a lot of debiasing strategies, right, to make our recruitment processes more inclusive. What other debiasing strategies have you found useful? Because I'm assuming that some of you use different methods, and I'd love to learn from your approach. And it'll be valuable for other people in the session as well. Anonymous testing. Yeah. So we talked about testing, but I didn't mention the anonymous part of it. That is absolutely, that can be great as well. Yeah. Also see some questions in the Q&A. Excellent. Gathering feedback, no identifying information on resumes. Diverse hiring panels. Yeah, that is something that I did not go into detail about, but diverse hiring panels can help because, it's a very high-stakes situation. Some candidates might see themselves well represented in the hiring panel, which can make them feel like they belong more in that space and can give them the boost to answer more confidently. And some people might not see themselves represented at all in the hiring panel, and perhaps it might cause them to feel a little less confident, and it can make the difference, right? These interviews and recruitment process can be so close sometimes. Standard rubric, absolutely. Yeah, standard rubric can be really helpful as well. Collecting as many sources for resume as possible. Yes, that is also something that I didn't get into, but the more we can diversify where we get resumes from, the more diverse our candidate pool is going to look like, right? That is a really good point as well. Giving the interview questions in advance, again, an excellent way to kind of, if there are people that feel really nervous, to give them the time to gather their thoughts and to come somewhat prepared. I think I've heard of questions being given, say, 1 day in advance, sometimes 2 days in advance, or an hour in advance. It depends. You can decide how it is that you want to do it, but it can help level the playing field. Job boards of equity deserving communities, absolutely. Yeah, there's people that want jobs, there's companies that want to hire people, but they're not always matching. So job boards that specifically target equity deserving communities can be helpful. Considering diversity quotas. Yeah, maybe not for one specific role, but let's say you have a team of 30 people and they have the exact same role, right? 30 people with the same title doing the same thing. Imagine you're working for a bigger company if you are not. Then maybe you can consider having a diversity quota within that larger number. So you're not making a decision for every candidate, but you're making decision for the whole team. Let's say that might also be a good idea. Hiring matrix. Textio, I guess you're using, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Textio. I'm going to go with Textio. I think that is a software that scans your job ads to see if there's any biased descriptions, if there's bias in your job descriptions. So that's a good tool as well. Score all candidates per question, horizontal versus vertical, rather than one per question, rather than one at a time completely. Okay, that's interesting. I had not heard of that. Thank you for sharing that. Audio only interviews, yeah, that can be a good idea as well, right? It takes away the appearance part of it. That's an interesting one. Advice from HR to hiring managers so they can ask non-biased questions. Absolutely. Random audit assessments of tools used. That's also helpful. Offering to paste the questions in the chat for candidates. Absolutely. Some people might feel more comfortable reading and answering rather than hearing. Again, it's a very high-stakes situation. Candidates are extremely nervous. Thank you so much for sharing all of these. I hope that some of these resonated with you and you feel like that is something that you would like to implement in your own workplace. So I'd like to finish this session. Oh, unfortunately, okay, I'm going to go over the business benefits really quickly because we only have a few minutes left. So it takes effort to do all of these, right? All of the things that we talked about takes effort and time. But why is it worth it? It's worth it because it leads to more meritorious selection. When we're evaluating candidates more fairly, more accurately, we're picking the more meritorious candidates, and we're making sure that we're not unnecessarily eliminating qualified candidates. At the same time, it's not at all contradictory with diversity and equity and inclusion, because inclusive hiring can lead to greater representation of equity-deserving communities because we're opening the door to more candidates. And it can also help improve employee retention because we're picking the better candidate, so they perform better in the job, they're able to stay on longer, instead of somebody that maybe we picked wrongly that wasn't actually suited to do the job well. For the company, it can lead to greater job performance, right? Better candidates means better job performance. We can also boost team morale and collaboration because we're picking the best possible candidates and not somebody that doesn't know how to do the job well. And we can also deal better with labor shortages when we are considering a broader range of candidates. So let me go to the open questions. I see 2 questions. How can social media profiles be evaluated in a way that's fair and free from unconscious bias? It can be tricky. I think the best thing I would suggest is if there is any way for you to block out the person's photo and look at it otherwise, I would suggest doing that. If there's a person that can somehow print the social media profile and kind of block out the picture, that would be my suggestion. Because the other parts of the social media profile is all right. I'm talking about LinkedIn specifically. It's mainly the picture that is problematic. What safeguards should be put in place when implementing AI in hiring process to avoid gender and other forms of bias? Again, I would say, like, we really need data that which are the candidates that are more likely to be selected by the model. We need data, and there is the data is available. It's just I'm not sure how often it is getting shared with the customers. But you can also track these numbers, right? You can see the gender distribution of the candidates, of the candidate profiles that you initially get. And after you run it through the model, how many male and female candidates are you getting at the end? And you might want to look into see if there's any particular bias. So I would definitely say data analytics and tracking can come in helpful in that. And once it comes in helpful, the solution would be to provide better data to the machine learning model. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with the model itself. It's the data that we initially started with. So if we recognize that there is bias, the way to correct it would be to provide more representative data to the model and to train it on that. So this is not stuff that we can all do on our own, but some of it we can, some of it we need to work with the companies that make these software. Thank you so much for the questions. I appreciate your time and your participation in today's session. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And I hope you found this session useful. Feel free to, feel free to check us out and the services that we offer if you would like to learn more about what we offer. I do have a quick note to make, which is that in September, we're not having a webinar, a monthly webinar like we usually do. Instead, Diversio, a company, is hosting a Changemaker Summit, which is a full day of panels and information sessions, which is fully free and fully online on 25th September. And my colleagues will share the details for this in the chat box right now. Please feel free to attend that. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you there. Thank you so much for your time, and see you in September.